Go on YouTube and look at any video with a, risque title and saucy thumbnail, and it probably has upwards of 1 million views. The other day, Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change challenged me to make a video on the hypothetical question, what would the world, what would our society be like if mainstream media were to actually do its job?
Reporters, do your job, please! Ask some questions.
And so I thought the best way to go about answering this question would be to first look at, like in a math problem, the problems that mainstream media causes, what is fundamentally wrong? And then based off of those problems, I figured we could not only propose solutions, but also, again, see the societal impact. And I have a list of about 4 different problems I'd like to look at. So the first problem I have with mainstream media is that it's opinion-based, it's not factual. And a lot of news networks do a great job at trying to disguise their biases and opinions as fact. Fox News comes to mind when I say this. They do a thing called these Fox News polls. And the deceptive part about it is they're not polling the whole populace. Instead, they're just polling Fox News viewers who obviously have a bias, and it'll make the network's opinions look good. It'll say, oh, Obama has a 0% approval rating. Wow, look at that. Meanwhile, CNN will probably do something similar with their liberal bias and say, oh, look, Obama has a 100% approval rating because obviously all the people who voted, approve Obama.
You have to look at these polls, and you have to look at them very skeptically. Should we believe the polls? Not all of them, no.
People view mainstream media as this behemoth, as this large, infallible entity that makes no mistakes, when, truth be told, the media is comprised of human beings. Do human beings make mistakes? Of course they do. Do human beings lie? Of course they do. So, for people to think, oh, whatever you see on mainstream media is fact, well, that's not entirely true. So, what's the societal impact on this? Well, for one, if reporters actually reported on the facts instead of their personal opinions or the network's opinions, we'd have a much more well-informed public because our actions are based off of information we receive. For example, if mainstream media one day decided to talk about the Electoral College and how truly our vote in national elections doesn't matter and it can be overridden by the Electoral College, a lot of people's actions would change. They probably wouldn't vote anymore. Also, if anchors and pundits stopped shoving their personal opinions down our throats as viewers,
bomb them, keep bombing them, bomb them again and again.
We'd be instead forced to actually think for ourselves and, formulate our own conclusions and opinions, which, for most Americans sounds radical. And lastly, I think getting all the facts as sort of an unfortunate byproduct would be that viewers and, the general public would probably be more frustrated and upset, which makes sense. You should be mad and upset at these issues. It's just a matter of properly finding the avenue to vent those opinions without violence, of course. My second issue with mainstream media is partisanship. It's the same thing like on Capitol Hill. You have the red versus blue, the Republican versus Democrat, the liberal versus conservative. Basically, they're just 2 different paths that lead to the same end destination.
I think the guy on the right shares my beliefs. Well, I think the person on the left is more to my liking. Wait a minute, there's one person holding up both puppets.
Even George Washington, in his farewell address to Congress, warned of political partisanship and the bitterness that may ensue from it, but unfortunately, it looks like we haven't heeded his advice. Another thing as well, it's a sad state of affairs when without even watching any content on the news network, you can already know their bias.
You are a dangerous man espousing dangerous nonsense.
Going back to labels for a second, the red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat, etc., these are all psychological labels designed by mainstream media, basically. Biologically, we feel better about ourselves, we have higher self-esteem when we are part of a group. It doesn't really matter what group it is, but labels are really just used to demonize each other and, further create this division that mainstream media loves. And mainstream media loves it so much because it keeps us preoccupied with these, battles against each other instead of actually examining the real issues at hand. So if mainstream media properly did its job and was nonpartisan, didn't label people, how would this impact our society? Well, for one, I think we'd be a lot more loving and open, compassionate towards other people. We wouldn't compartmentalize ourselves from them and see ourselves as so different. We'd actually be getting both sides of the story instead of, censoring the bad parts of, say, Democrats if it's on MSNBC and censoring the bad parts of the Republicans if it's on Fox. That's kind of equivalent to, two kids at school getting in trouble for punching another classmate in the face, and only one kid gets to testify. We're not getting both sides of the story. Similarly, my number 3 issue with mainstream media is advertisers. Basically, information gets censored that, makes the advertisers, the financiers of the networks, look bad. By definition, this is a bribe. It's persuading someone to act in one's favor, typically illegally or dishonestly, by a gift of money or other inducement. Basically, don't bite the hand that feeds you. As far as a solution for this problem, well, I think it could be easily solved if the networks voluntarily, not legally, disclosed publicly their advertisers, because then we could know their biases from the get-go. My 4th and final problem with mainstream media is the rating system. Basically, these media companies are dependent on viewership for their income. While in itself this business model isn't inherently bad, these greedy companies, obviously to maximize their profits, use techniques like fear-mongering and sensationalism to get the maximum amount of sustained viewership.
Congresswoman, let me interrupt you just for a moment. We've got some breaking news out of Miami. Stand by, if you will. Right now in Miami, Justin Bieber has been arrested on a number of charges.
Similar to certain food companies putting ingredients like sugar into their products to get customers hooked and addicted and continue to get them buying the product, thus increasing their revenue, a lot of media companies will also integrate sex into their content. Usually this has less to do with politics and news and more to do with reality TV and entertainment news, but it's still part of mainstream media. And you have to remember, sex sells. Go on YouTube and look at any video with a, risque title and saucy thumbnail, and it probably has upwards of 1 million views. Contrary to what I said earlier about viewers being rightfully upset because they'd have all the facts from mainstream media if it did its job, I think by curtailing sensationalism and fear-mongering from the diets of viewers, they'd be pacified, and in a good way.
You need to be afraid, because they are coming for you.
Do not listen to the hysterical voices on the radio and the television or read the fear-provoking words online.
They wouldn't be getting this constant 24/7 stream of only negative news and information. Thus, they wouldn't be glued to their TV, they could spend more time with their family, and not only that, but I'm sure it's not, a deciding factor, but a contributing factor, is that people would be less anxious. They probably wouldn't be on as many pharmaceutical drugs as they are, and that obviously has vast implications. Also, on the note of mainstream media selling sex, if it weren't to rely solely on sex for its revenue stream, I think things would be much different. For one, I would postulate teen pregnancy rates would be much lower because we become that which we gaze upon. But then again, if I'm going to look at a platter of non-GMO cookies all day, it doesn't mean I'm going to get fat. So in closing, as with all technology, mainstream media is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can give us information immediately from around the world, but on the other hand, it can look at profits superlative to facts. Historically, it's the same thing as the cotton gin, this piece of technology that made picking cotton easier. But at the end of the day, the demand for slaves actually increased. So the question is mainstream media actually improving our quality of life? And honestly, I yearn for the day here on YouTube when I lose my job, because for once it'll mean that the mainstream media is doing their job and the market has no desire or want for an alternative. Now, I want to get your take. In the comments below, I want you to let me know one problem you have with mainstream media, a potential solution to that problem, and then also how society would be affected, hopefully positively, by the fix to that problem. Peace, love, and liberty. Andrew Demeter, signing out. The process of mind manipulation or control doesn't require sci-fi gadgetry or hypnotism. A CIA propaganda campaign into both foreign and domestic media to subvert communism.